and welcome to the May CaptureCast webinar for 2024. Today, we're going to talk about gaining traction, data-driven strategies for engaging transfer students. I am Chris Harris. I am the Senior Enrollment Strategist here at Capture Higher Ed. I've been here for 3 years, and before that, I spent 25 years on college campuses, just like you are, trying to identify, convert, and enroll more students each year as we try to build our enrollment every year. So I've been with you on your side, and I'm on your side now too, but just in a different capacity. So hope today's webinar is something that brings some ideas for you, gives you some energy, and hopefully you can take some stuff away today as we go through it, because transfers are big. So today we're looking to cover some answers, right? We're always looking for these questions. And the first question is, how can we discover effective data to identify and target prospective transfer students? And I think one of the things that we're going to talk about is there is a ton of data that is out there. It's in your CRM, it's in your marketing automation, it's in your Google Analytics, it's everywhere, right? It's in your spreadsheets on your campus, because I know you guys are still using spreadsheets. I know you people, because you're just like me. I still have spreadsheets too. But how do we get all that data? How do we put it into a process that we can really use to attract transfer students? Two, how can we identify innovative marketing techniques and tactics? What's new? What are things that we should be doing with transfer students that might be a little bit different than normal traditional undergraduates, but maybe even not in a graduate recruitment perspective as well. So we're answering that question. And lastly, what are some of the strategic approaches that we can be taking to streamline the process for prospective transfer students? We throw up a lot of roadblocks, don't we? You know it, I know it. What are some of those things I'm going to hit home today about that at the end here? And then the other thing too is, I think Emma, if you're out there, our executive producer, Emma Brown, is in Louisville at HQ. Emma, sometime today, could you put the transfer guide, transfer checklist up in the chat for us today? That'd be great. And if not, we'll send it out to everybody that's registered for the event as a part of the email. Thank you for coming to visit with us today. But we're going to send that out to you too, because it does have some of that information in there too. So just a little bit about us. For those of you new to the CaptureCast, welcome. I'm glad to see you. I'm glad you're here. A little bit about us. Capture Higher Ed is a leading enrollment marketing firm that believes that every interaction counts. Every email you send, every website page that you create, every digital ad you deploy, every text message you send has to be relevant and personal. And we do this through our behavioral intelligence platform. It's the only behavioral intelligence platform that was created for higher education. And we are the very best at identifying, converting, and enrolling the right students. So that's what we do on a daily basis. But today we're going to talk about how to get transfer students, right? So let's get into it. So as always, we always start off our webinars with the question of the day. And Emma, go ahead and pop the question up as I read it. Our quick little poll today. There are approximately 75 days left. That gives us till about August 15th, until the start of the fall 2024 semester. How are you feeling about your transfer student funnel right now? Are your efforts focused, segmented? You're hitting all the benchmarks? Are you getting it? Are you getting better? Are you finding, that there's gaps in what you're doing? You have stuck to this is what we always do. It's going to happen, and this is just the way it's going to be. Or last, we have no real plan. And I don't think anybody doesn't have a plan. I'm pretty sure everybody has a transfer plan by now. If not, call me. I will help you put a transfer plan together from now for the next 75 days. I can do that for you. And we'll get you there, but hopefully nobody says that. So as you're looking at the scores coming in right now, most of you we're getting better, but there are still gaps in our approach. And I think there's some things that we need to talk about too about your approach, but I also want to kind of think back to where we are in the cycle right now too. And thanks, Emma, for that. Technical there. Thanks for sharing that with us, Emma. I think one of the things that we need to remind ourselves of is that it is the end of May. Students just left campus within the last 2 or 3 weeks, right? And students are now home. They're starting to feel buyer's remorse, maybe a little bit more than usual. A lot of times they are in a situation where They're thinking about what's the next step for them. I know we look at student athletes and the transfer portal and things like that because that's what hits the news. But there's about 1.3 million students a year, according to the National Student Clearinghouse, that don't that transfer every year. 1.3 million. That's a lot of transfer students. So we got to be thinking about where our students are right now, where they are in their process. Some of them are like, I'm not going back to school, or maybe I'm not going back to that school, or maybe I want to transfer to this school, or maybe I want to stay closer to home, those kinds of things. Or maybe I just finished my 2-year associate's degree and it's time to transfer and move up to a 4-year degree. There's a lot of different things in there that you can talk about, and a lot of different audiences as well. So thank you, Emma, for handling the poll and quiz for us today. Today's agenda, let's run through that real quick. We're going to talk a little bit about the market. Not going to spend a lot of time on it because we've talked about it over and over again. We know that the enrollment cliff is here, but we're going to talk just a little bit about that here in a second. We're going to talk about components of a plan. When we talk about transfers, a lot of times we just talk about, well, it's whatever shows up, whatever comes in. But I think we need to be a little bit more tactical about our approach and how we build out our plan. We need to talk about leveraging data to help build your plan. So what data needs to go into that? What are some of those things that really stand out in the process that you need to know and understand so that you can build out your better funnel? Dynamic content and personalized messaging. Cannot stress this enough. The amount of content that you put out for transfer students, but more importantly, the type and the personalization behind the content that you're putting out for transfer students means a lot. No more, these folks are more focused on where they're going, what they're going to do. They might not need to know all the warm and fuzzy things about your institution like you would with a normal undergrad. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about engagement with students where they are. Okay, they are in different places all the time. They're on campus. They're on their phone. They're on their computer. They are, sitting at the arcade. They're sitting at Starbucks right now. Where are they? Where are they engaging with you in your website and your digital assets? How are you getting your message to them in a multi-pronged approach? And then again, we're going to talk about what else we should be doing as we go through that. So let's talk a little bit about where we are in the transfer market. So when it comes to enrollment, we've been reading and seeing over this decline of enrollment, right? We know about the enrollment cliff, and we thank Dr. Nathan Groff for his work on creating the information that we needed for the enrollment cliff. We've known this is coming for a long time, but with less students entering the institutions, means maybe possibly less transfer students. However, the one thing that has happened is that transfers have kind of stayed flat. The number of transfer students has remained remarkably the same year after year. So when you add anxiety of the part of not having enough regular undergraduates, then people on campus start to think about diversification of where your students are going to come from. So you have normal traditional undergrads, you'll have transfer students, you'll have graduate students, and you're going to have online and adult students, right? Or certificate programs. There's a lot of different channels that are out there now for us. But we need to start to think about how do we build out these transfer populations to make sure that we are getting to where we need to be so that we make budget, so that we have large graduation classes, which lead to better alumni development too, right? So remember, when we talk about recruitment, we're not talking about just recruitment for 1 year or 2 years. We're recruiting graduates. So we look at each student as a future graduate of your institution, right? So that's important as you move through this process. Be thinking about what those students look like when they graduate. That'll help with your alumni development as well. So get your data game together, right? For many institutions, transfers have not been the focus. It's always been a side hustle. That second job that you have on the side. A lot of times you may have like one transfer person on your campus. If you're a smaller campus, maybe 2 or 3 people. If you're a larger campus, they're just focused on transfers. But you're starting to see the conversation needs to be, hey, there's 1.3 million students out there. We need to get our fair share of those students. So let's talk about some data. First, research and establish your goals. I think every year going into it now, right now, you probably already have a goal for this year. And if you don't, then that's an interesting concept that you should probably get one, something to work toward. Most salespeople have a goal each year. So you should have a goal as well. How many inquiries, how many applications, how many acceptances, how many deposits, how many students actually enroll who are transfer students. And how you measure that through that process for a transfer student might be a little bit different than you would manage for like a traditional undergraduate student. You have to think about college transcripts. You have to think about extra housing differences, those kinds of things, placement into courses. So having your research and establishing your goals, I think, is a really big important thing to have. Two, construct the appropriate budget. That's always funny, right? When we're talking about budget. But right now, again, we're talking about budgets for 2025. Think about that right now. Vice presidents, deans, those who have budget control, you've already pretty much spent what you're going to spend for the class of 2024. You're thinking about the class of 2025. What is it going to take? What's it going to take for you, I should say, to get to that next point with your budget? If you want more transfer students, how much did it cost you to recruit one transfer student? How many did it cost you to do 20? How many does it cost you? How much does it cost you to do that each year? And what do you need to do to increase, whether it's digital advertising, whether it's more email, whether it's more travel, whether it's creating new transfer partnerships, those kinds of things. That all of that has a cost. So being able to put a budget center together just for transfer students, like you would normally do with regular undergraduate students, or maybe even specific graduate programs, I think is an important thing to do. Third, geography. Where and who, right? Who are these people? Where are they coming from? Are they international students? Are they students from obviously the local community that you have who have maybe gone off to a different college far away from home, but have decided, hey, I want to be a little closer at home. I want to transfer back. Or if you're at a 2-year institution, maybe someone went off to a 4-year school and just didn't feel it was a right fit. They're going to come back to the 2-year school. And if you're at a 2-year school, or I should say that you're at a 4-year school, maybe that's students who are graduating in a very specialized program or a specific program on a campus that matches up well with your 4-year degree, going and looking for those programs. But being able to identify who those people are and where they are is just as important, because it's not just within 50 miles or 80 miles anymore. You can reach students across the nation because of the digital footprint that you have. And fourthly, integrate multiple sources, right? So we've talked about this ad nauseum, right? In Kura, CapEx, all of these different places, you can pick up transfer students and transfer information. We're going to talk a little bit about a different angle that you can go after here in a second, but just be thinking about where all your students come from, and you should have that information in your CRM. What is that first point of contact? What kind of source code is that? You should have that data available to be able to make decisions about where you're going to spend money moving in the future. So we talk about increased speed to lead, right? And so one of the things that search has done is it's evolved. It's morphed into more of a multifaceted approach. Yes, higher education, we still do print, but if you look at it here, this is just a normal journey of a multi-channel approach of working with transfer students. You can do student search, you can buy names, right? Students can be attracted through digital advertising, but how you nudge them through and how you help them move through the process as they work through your website and interact with your email, those kinds of things is important as well. But you have to expand your reach. Many students interact on a limited number of channels. So maybe they don't want to interact with your digital ad, but maybe they will respond to an email. Maybe that postcard that you sent home, the mom and dad see in the mail, and they're like, hey, Johnny, have you considered, I know you weren't happy, have you considered X university or X college to go back to school for next year? So I think that's important to kind of keep that in mind, is that students work through this process the same way they did as an undergrad, but they do it faster. They do it faster because they know and understand what they want and what they need when they're talking. So one of the things that we talk a lot about is the use of Engage. Now, Engage is the marketing automation platform that is housed within the behavioral intelligence platform here at Capture. And Engage really is outstanding at producing dynamic content to generate leads. So one of the things that we deploy on your website on your behalf would be a specific PID form. It's offered to students who are not in your inquiry or suspect pool, but there are students who we have not been able to identify and grab and know who they are on your website. So students who you have maybe recruited a couple of years ago, we would still be able to identify who they are if they're coming back. but also be able to serve them a form that they can fill out very quickly, that lets you know that they're interested in your institution again. It grabs them, makes them more susceptible to uh, going through the process of application and being accepted. And usually when a student fills out a PID form, they're 14 times more likely to enroll. So if they're going to interact with you, besides just visiting a bunch of pages on your website, it's very easy to do that. One of the things that's really great about Engage is that it shows you not only the number of forms that have been submitted and your conversion rate, your organic forms, and I'm not going to show you what really the backside looks like. You have to get a demo for that, but it's all the way down to the student level. So we can tell and say, Chris Harris visited the website. He visited these 5 pages. This is what he was looking at, those kinds of things. So that your counseling staff, and we're going to talk about how you can leverage your counseling staff later, but how your counseling staff can take that information and create a personalized approach to communicating with that prospective student as they move through it. So using that dynamic content, then it's all rules based. So the beauty of that is that it's there 24 hours a day. Things move and shake, whether it's a dynamic email or it's a triggered email or a piece of dynamic content to help that student identify where they are in their process and the enrollment process and get them to nudge into the next thing. So whether it's come visit campus, file your FAFSA. And I know I just said FAFSA and everybody's got a twitch about that right now, but it's still something that they're going to need to do. They're going to have to switch from the institution that they're at right now to you. So what kind of information are you giving your prospective students about, hey, here's our FAFSA code if you're transferring, or if you're a new student? There's a lot of students who are applying just regular undergrad right now too. We're seeing, how quickly are you getting that information in front of those students? How quickly are you getting information in front of parents? Because I think that's an important part of too. But Engage allows you, the marketing automation platforms allow you to be there at 2 o'clock in the morning when that student is on your website, or when that student is looking at your information but doesn't really want to call you and have that conversation with you yet. You're able to serve up a piece of dynamic content to that prospective student to allow them to walk through that process a little bit easier. And it's a lot. We measure that just like we do with the PID forms as a student moves through. So when you're talking about leveraging your data, what I like to say is this: data is not king. Okay. I've always believed, and like I said, I spent 25 years on a college campus before coming on to Capture, but we really believe that enrollment management and enrollment marketing is an art and a science. The science is the data piece, right? So we can take all of the data that we want. We can put it in and we can create beautiful predictive models. Our team creates some of the best predictive modeling out there for students who would apply and then who would also enroll at your institution. But when you have that prospective information in front of you, there's a lot of ways that you can go with it. And sometimes more data doesn't mean better, but you're able to take the art of it and create your value propositions and your recruitment statements, those kinds of things, to get that student engaged with what it is that you want them to do. Your talent is where that art comes into. So your talent being those in your office who are making contact with your prospective students, your admissions counselors, your student staff, if you have student telecounselors or student ambassadors who are making phone calls. The art of that is creating those relationships based upon the data so that you know that you're not, number one, wasting your time on calling students or interacting with students who are not really interested in you or not showing enough interest for you to show interest in that process. But when you're leveraging the data, what are your competitors? Be looking at what your competitors are doing. Collect data and use it to refine your strategies. And we're going to talk about how that looks here in a second. But that omni-channel consistent messaging is an important thing. I want to stress that enough. There are some institutions out there who say certain things on the website, do different things in the digital advertising world, and then their counselors are saying something different. There needs to be a full circle strategy about what we're saying, when we're saying it, and how we're saying it. And that's really what this graphic is about. You're taking all of these things together and you're putting it into a strategy. And how you implement that strategy here is important. And it's about measurement, folks. It's about taking every single thing that you do. You know that if your admissions counselors make 25 phone calls, that on average they're going to hit seven conversations, and of those seven conversations, maybe they get two applications out of it. You already know that from working um, within your CRM and working with your teams. But when you're talking about using dynamic content, when you're talking about using digital advertising, when you're talking about things that you uh, kind of set it, and you can, I don't want to say forget it, but when you set it, you need to look at it so that you can maximize what's happening to make sure that the messages that you're sending out are being interacted with and that they are meaningful to those prospective students. If they're opening it, but they're not taking that next step to click into it, maybe your message isn't right, or maybe they're not ready to set up their campus visit yet. Maybe you're a little early on that message. So you have to measure everything all the time. And that's where the data science piece comes in. And what I'm really proud of is our recruitment offices and our marketing offices and our college campuses are understanding now that having all of this data means that we should be sharing it together. We should be working together to create this experience for prospective students as they move through that. I'm really proud of our industry for doing that because for the longest time, the marketing folks had one idea and the recruitment and marketing people had a different idea. Now, more than ever today, they're coming together and they're looking at what works, what doesn't work, what are we spending money on, those kinds of things to make sure that we're moving our students through in a journey that is good for them. Now, what it used to be was back in the day, it was really interesting. On the left-hand side here, it used to be back when I started in 1996, kind of a long time ago. When I started in 96, we would just kind of set the strategy and we would go out and recruit. And then, it'd become May, June, and then we would kind of measure it all up. Did it work? Did the funnel work? How does that work? Okay, great. And then boom, we create the next strategy for the next year. But now that we moved to more into this digital world, and I think digital is going to change over the next, it's going to continue to evolve over the next 20 years probably. But now you can set a strategy. You can start your marketing and recruiting, but you can measure, optimize, measure, optimize, measure, optimize. And depending upon whatever schedule you have set up in your digital world, if you're measuring things on a weekly basis, we measure applications, acceptances, enrollments, deposits, student housing on a weekly basis on campus, right? If you're an admissions director or if you're a financial aid director or if you're an enrollment manager, that's what you do. That's part of your report every week. How many kids came to visit that week? Those kinds of things. We have charts. We've got all kinds of that data laying around. But on the digital side, what did we do digitally from a digital ad or a piece of dynamic content that created that opportunity? Kind of works itself into like the sales module. If you know a little bit about how sales works, it's finding what that person needs and directing them to the right place so that they can see what they need and nudging them through that process in an electronic kind of way. Excuse me, and optimizing your message to make sure that the student is getting what they need. So as we're fighting for new students now, at the end of May, June, July, data is going to help drive who you're going to talk to and when you're going to talk to them, right? And I think that's the important thing about engagement and re-engage. So we're talking about engagement. So here's some things that you really need to kind of think about. Former prospective students who may have left your institution for whatever reason. So if you're a student, if you had a prospective student that actually enrolled on your campus but left for whatever reason, there's been a big push the last 2 or 3 years about re-engaging with those students and bringing them back to campus. If there's a way to make that happen, it works out really well for the student. A lot of institutions have put extra financial aid toward those students. It helps with graduation rates. It helps with completion rates. I get that. But at the same time, the student was comfortable coming to your institution at one point in time, right? They were comfortable enough to trust you to teach them on your campus, whether they were living on your campus or commuting. So being able to find those former students is a big deal. 2, students who may have chosen a different institution, but chose to go to another institution, but all of a sudden start reappearing on your website. As you start to see that, one of the beauties of Engage is that we can see what school that student is coming from. So, if you're, and I live in the state of South Carolina, so if you look at students who are moving in and around, we have a wonderful 2-year two-year institutions around our state. And we've got big state universities like Clemson and the University of South Carolina, but we have a lot of great private colleges too. So as students are able to move around the state, when you're talking about local colleges and universities, local could be 60 miles. Well, within 60 miles, pretty much anywhere in our state and most of the states in the Midwest, within 60 miles, you could hit 2 or 3 institutions, maybe 4. If you're in a larger metropolitan area, think about Columbus, Ohio. How many colleges and universities are within Franklin County and the counties surrounding Franklin County there in Columbus, Ohio? There's a lot to choose from there. So being able to identify students who are hitting your website or maybe your digital ads that are out there for transfers is a good idea. Also, students who may have chosen to take a gap year. Now, this was more prevalent back in the year after COVID, but there are still students, very good students, who are taking gap years, whether they're going on missionary trips or maybe they're taking internships, or maybe they're just taking a year off to kind of just sit back and relax before they head off to school, or maybe they're going to take a couple classes here and there at the local community college. I think that's something to be considering. But those students are still out there. You can see that information a lot of times in the National Student Clearinghouse. If they've come through your application process but didn't enroll, you'll have that ability to see whether where they went or maybe where they haven't gone, so that you can look at their major and then start to formulate those messages again, which would resonate with that prospective student. So, okay, email still works. It does. One great way to engage with students is through behavioral email, but also through regular email too. So if you have a marketing automation platform, a lot of the marketing automation platforms have behavioral email. So as a student walks through, as you produce email, the student interacts with an email, they jump into a different email set, which helps them get through the process more instead of just trying to engage them the first time. What we've seen over time is that students take anywhere from 7 to 8 times of contact before they actually raise their hand. But the beauty of the marketing automation platform, especially with Engage, is that it's got a 99.7% delivery rate. And usually we see anywhere about 30 to 35% from a click to open rate. So that helps a lot, especially with students who have already interacted with maybe your website. So as you start to collect that data about how the student is interacting with your messaging, then your counseling staff, and again, I go back to where that counseling staff comes in, to where they can go out and win by having a good conversation, or win by having a great text message, or win by sending their own personalized email to that prospective student and their family, because I think that's the important piece about that. So email still works, gang. Don't go away from it. Just don't clutter people's inboxes with it. Be careful with it. Be strategic about it. Make sure that your messaging is clean and crisp, and make sure you A/B test everything. Just normal marketing 101 right there for you. 2, determine location-based placement with search. Okay, so you have your search names. Now you have your search names, you can start to look at where those students are, where maybe students in the past have possibly looked at transferring to your institution. You can serve digital ads into those areas, whether you geofencing or geo-targeting, whatever term you want to use, maybe around, I don't know, a large university nearby that you want to gather transfer students from, or where students typically transfer from. Or if you identify a school where maybe students have done well, that have transferred to your institution, or if they have a specialized program at that 2-year institution at the community college that you want to attract those students to your campus, then at the same time you're able to grab and put out there some digital ads to create some excitement in those areas, and that also gets you into some new areas as well, right? So that allows you to explore and not have to spend an arm and a leg and send one of your counselors out for 2 days, those kinds of things. You can kind of test the waters ahead of time, build brand with your digital ad, and grab some prospective students that way. You can always harness the power of the list-based digital targeting too. So if you have the list, you can send information targeted to that student through your digital ads. So segment your transfer list out. So you can segment it by, well, you're a transfer. There's one. You can segment it by program. if you know what program they're interested in. You could segment by scholarship opportunity if you know what their grade point average looks like, if you're offering those kinds of scholarships. If you offer a transfer scholarship, obviously that goes into that too. But you can expand digital advertising by use your customer matching in Google search, display and video campaigns. I think the video campaign does really well with transfer students as well, because they're used to seeing most of the colleges and universities using that. So continue to talk and use your video, but again, change the messaging to be about transfer students, what transfer students go through, how a transfer student has done well on your campus, maybe an alumni or alumni, I should say, that has graduated who had transferred in and had a wonderful experience at your institution. But having the social media platforms and using your list-based digital targeting is a big thing you should use. I'm losing my voice. Prospect new future students with lookalike audiences as well. So if you have a ton of data, okay, this is going to be more important than ever moving before. As the decline in number of students, right? The number of students entering college is kind of leveled off, maybe a little bit of a drop here in the next 2 years. The population shifting from let's see, from the Northeast and the middle part of the section of the United States to more south and to more west. We're seeing large amounts of students from the Midwest and the Northeast moving to South Carolina. We're one of the fastest growing states around. So is Kentucky. So is Texas, obviously, and Louisiana, Georgia. I think Atlanta is going to take over Georgia itself here soon. It's getting so big. Florida is huge as well. What you're seeing is that there's this great migration of students. So it's going to be important that you be able to identify where students are, where they may be in the future, so that you can start to create those lookalike audiences, bringing that information in, and then creating your Google approach for that, and then sending out those branded emails, the branded digital ads, and starting to create that brand awareness in the area. Because not everybody is like a University of South Carolina or an Ohio State or UCLA or University of Central Florida, these huge institutions. There are some wonderful private colleges and universities that are out there that you can get students to transfer to your institution by helping them and identifying where they are, because they might not know about you yet. Which is fine. There's more than 5,000 colleges and universities in the United States. But being able to find where those students are and get your information in front of them is an important thing, especially moving it all together. So what's this look like? When you bring it all together, we have a ton of student data, right? So if we start on the left side of the screen and work our way to the right, ton of student data out there. So that comes from search and other sources. So whether you're doing search or a student raises their hand and says, "Hey, I'm here," we have a ton of student data that's out there. It's always been there, but we have more access to it now than ever before. Then we can deploy all of our digital strategies. And remember, we talked about that omni-channel approach, right? Whether it's digital advertising, whether it's email, whether it's dynamic content, whether it's your counselors going out and sending out their own emails, those kinds of things. There's all these digital strategies that are out there, but the most important thing is that we are able to measure it in the behavioral intelligence platform or within your marketing automation platform. At Capture, we use Engage, and that student behavior comes back in, is collected, and then is harnessed all the way down to the specific student level. So again, you would be able to see that Chris came to our website at 3:00 in the morning, and he was really interested in scholarships and grants, and then he looked at housing as well. Tells you right there that, okay, Chris is really serious about us if he's thinking about where he's going to lay his head down at night, right? So what you do with all that information then becomes the strategy, right? The bigger strategy is, number one, marketing spend. If you're able to see what's working and what's not working on a day-to-day basis, whether this Google ad or whether this this triggered email, is they're not getting any traction. Maybe you change the headline. Maybe you change the hero image on your email. Maybe you're changing what you say, or maybe some of the links that were within that email. But you can change those things quite quickly. But you have to have in mind, too, your optimization plan. You can't knee-jerk react to everything. So whether you look to optimize once a month, once a week, once every 2 weeks, having that plan in place ahead of time with your digital team is a big deal, and it's very, very important. Two, your counselor outreach. And again, gang, you know, and I know this is the end of May, right? And we have been under this crunch because of FAFSA. Let's just say it again, because of this year. And we're seeing right now that 2025 might not be any better, with regards to how long and stretched out this FAFSA thing is making this enrollment year look like for us. So your teams are stressed, and I get it. I've been there. I've been there on a college campus where I was the only admission counselor left at the end of May. Everybody else left, and you're stuck trying to make all those phone calls and send out all those emails. But being able to give your counseling staff the data that they need to contact who, when, and what about takes you to the whole next level. They know that if they're picking up the phone and they're calling Chris on the phone, that they know that Chris was interested, okay, or that they want else, that Chris needs help getting through the next step. It's not more of a blanket call where you just, hey, are you interested anymore? It's more of, hey, I saw that you were maybe interested in scholarships, or maybe that you need some more information about housing. What can I do to help you? Those are better conversations for your counselors to have. Those are more fun conversations for your counselors to have. And then also the print and mail outreach too, right? So when we're talking about transfer students, we still have to think about, and we're going to talk about on the next slide here, but there is a certain segment of people that we need to get in front of still. And those are parents. Okay, parents still have influence, right? They're still helping pay the bill, maybe. Maybe they're still helping Chris find his way through this process. And I think it's important. So, when we talk about what else we can do on our campuses, the first thing is get a team of specialists to streamline the process for transfer students. Your team should consist of somebody from the admissions office, somebody from your records department and admissions, somebody from your registrar's office, probably who's doing transfer evaluations, somebody from your financial aid office, and somebody from housing, and probably somebody from new student orientation as well. Those might be 5 different people, 5 different departments, or maybe if you're on a smaller campus, a couple of those may be combined into one kind of situation. But when you're talking about enrolling students, we're talking about clearance, right? So if we're going to go back and use the move the needle concept for you enrollment managers out there, the move the needle concept says we got to get students cleared, right? So what are the 5, 7, 10, whatever your campus needs to enroll that student? But get a team together to start thinking about, if they're not this year, for next year. How do we streamline this process for prospective students? It shouldn't take 3 weeks to get a transfer evaluation. It shouldn't take, and I know it will, 3 weeks to get a financial aid package, those kinds of things right now. But what are those things that we can do to release some of these barriers for prospective transfer students? 2, cross-educate. Now, people say cross-train. And I was reminded by a nursing faculty member way back when she said, Juanita Reese Klein, by the way, said to me, Chris, we don't train humans, we educate humans. And I firmly believe in that too. But cross-educate your admissions counselors to be one-stop shops for all things transfer. If you have one person in the office that's in charge of transfer students and that's all they do, and they're able to handle the load, that's okay. But if you have 3 or 4 that can chip in and help, whether it's, hey, I'm going to make that phone call, or hey, I can send that email for you, or I'm going to run these transcripts over and get the transfer evaluation, or maybe they can do the transfer evaluation for you. If you get them cross-educated, they can help you get through that process faster, help that prospective student only have to make one phone call to one counselor. I know that if I'm working with a company or organization and I'm buying something, I only want to work with one account rep. I don't want to have to count the account rep. Then I don't want to have to talk to the budget office, and I don't want to have to talk to the implementation team. And I don't want to, you know what I mean? I want to talk to one person so that I can get to these other people. But one person and one-stop shop always seems to work really, really well with transfer students. 3, build transfer relationships with associate degree granting institutions. There are more and more of those being created all over the United States. Whether it's RN to BSN programs, or business degrees that are turning into MBAs, where they're going to 2+3 and they're getting MBAs. I think the world in higher education is on the precipice of making major changes. No more is it going to be the 120 hours for a bachelor's degree. It might be 90 hours. What does that look like for a student who decides or maybe starts off at the community college and then transfers to your institution? What's that look like for them moving forward? And how can you break down those barriers of classes, types of classes, and classifications within your curriculum so that your catalog isn't a mess, number one. And number two, students feel comfortable moving across the way. And four, and I can't stress this enough, guys, don't forget about parents. While these students, prospective transfer students, have gone through this process once, maybe twice now, and they're looking to transfer your institution, their family is still the biggest cheerleader that they have. They're the people that they rely on. They're the people that they get advice from on a day-to-day basis. If you collect parent data, or if you're able to collect parent data, whether it's through a PID form, or just call John on the phone, or maybe it's in the application, and you ask them, what's your parents' information? What email can we send stuff to your parents? Number one, parents appreciate that, number one. And number two, it will help you as an admissions counselor if you have a good working relationship with a parent as well. Because parents a lot of times have questions about finances, payment plans, and getting ready to come to school, those kinds of things. And they will call where the prospective student might not call you. Maybe the prospective student doesn't care about having extra long sheets on the bed, but mom knows we need to get extra long sheets. So I think it's an important part of that process. So don't forget parents. Create parent communications for your transfer students. It's no different than your undergrads. It's just their needs are a little bit different because they've already been down this path once. So being more direct with transfer student parents is a good thing too when you're working through them. So as we start to wind up, let's take away things from today. First, engage with students when they're engaged with you. Your pro tip today is students on your website. There are students on your website at all hours, all the time. Ask your webmaster, what time are they hitting the website? Where are those IP addresses coming from? And be sure that you have marketing automation in place that's fueled by student behavior. It's not good enough to have a drip campaign anymore. Okay. It's not. CRMs are great. CRMs are great. I love every CRM that I've ever implemented on a college campus because they were able to help us. As that student completed that task, the next thing happened. They came for a visit, they got a thank you card. They applied, they got the acknowledgement letter. They got accepted, they got an acceptance packet. But if that student is visiting you at 2 o'clock in the morning and they're checking out, again, your scholarship information, then you should be looking at what kind of information that student should see. And that student should be getting that triggered email maybe 6 hours later coming out of your marketing automation because it's based upon the student behavior. That's the difference there between regular marketing automation, which Capture is the best at using behavioral intelligence, versus your CRM. Okay. And your CRMs are great. Don't get me wrong. Love CRM. Without the CRM, I remember being on a campus that didn't have CRM before CRMs happened. That's how old I am. So making sure that you engage with students when they engage with you is a big deal. Two, let the data help you formulate your messaging. See what they're doing. Behavioral intelligence means that you're taking the behavior and giving them the information that they need and that they want based upon what they're looking at, right? It helps make their enrollment journey authentic, right? You're giving them the information they want when they need it. You're not dictating to them. They're actually dictating to you based upon their behavior what message you need to provide to them. If a student doesn't hit your financial aid website at all while they're coming to campus, that might be a question for your counselor to call on the phone and say, hey, are you filing FAFSA? Or you're not going to file FAFSA? We just need to produce a financial aid package for you. Great. Again, that's how that conversation is set up. But looking and making sure that, and Gen Z wants this more than anything, they want an authentic journey through this enrollment process. Helping them get through it is a big deal. And lastly, reconnect with former students and applicants. You have a wealth of information at your fingertips. So whether you are going back a couple of years on your inquiry pool or your application pool and reaching back out to those students, or whether you're identifying new pools of where students are based upon search and digital advertising, and you're out there, and I hate to use the word fishing, but you're kind of out there casting that net to see where students are. Students are leaving campuses for a ton of different reasons right now. And there's really not one major thing. Now, everybody will say, well, it's always finances. It's not. Being comfortable on campus, finances, housing. I didn't have a great roommate. I didn't, whatever it is. I'm homesick. I miss my dog. Those kinds of things. All of that plays in, folks. But being able to look at where they were in that process, where they may have gone to school, and you can address those issues on your campus and talk with that prospective student about what why they made that decision, and now why they're interested in maybe possibly enrolling with you. I think is a big advantage that you have, because you already have a ton of data about that student. Things change, majors change, financial situations change, but that's where the art and the science of enrollment management comes in, right? Your counselor should be nuanced enough to be able to ask certain questions to get a feel for where that student and that family is during this process. And it's about connection. We talk about connection, we talk about personalization, and we talk about using the data to get us to that point, right? So as we finally wind down today, any final comments that I have? The big thing is that transfer students it's big now, right? And students are really starting to raise their hands. So be fast to reply, be quick. As a student hits your website, as a student fills out their application, as you see we would have transcripts come in from students who hadn't applied yet, those kinds of things. As you see that, make sure that you have a plan in place to address those transfer students.